And thanks so much for tuning in to Morning Live. And this, of course, the big story that we went to bed with and woke up to this morning. Embattled national carrier SAA has cancelled nearly all its domestic, regional and international flights for this weekend. Now, this comes at the back of an announcement by both the South African Cabin Crew Association and the National Union of Metalworkers of South Africa. And this, of course, of an intended strike action starting tomorrow. In studio with us now, we have SAA's interim CFO, Deon Fredericks, and he's joined by the airline spokesperson, Tlali Tlali. Thanks so much to both of you for coming through.
Thank you very much, and good morning to the listeners.
Let's just start on a point of clarity with regard to what exactly tomorrow's strike action is about. There was, of course, an announcement of retrenchments earlier on in the week, but my understanding at this point is that tomorrow's strike actually relates to wage negotiations. So can we just get some clarity on that?
That's correct. The only item on the agenda is the wage increases. We've seen that the union has put other matters also as part of their press release. That's not part of the strike, so it's contained to the wage increases.
So speaking to the strike action, and this is of course about salary increment. So where are those negotiations at the moment? Because again, the understanding is that salary increment offer was made to the pilots, but the rest of the staff were told it's subject to the availability of funds. So let's talk to that.
I think let's put the pilots into context. The pilots have a 5-year agreement. In terms of that agreement, they're entitled to an increase. This year, because of our difficult financial situation, which is dependent on performance, we've indicated to the pilots as well that we can't afford the increase. We had various discussions with them. We ended up at arbitration. Unfortunately, we lost the arbitration case, and as a result we were forced to pay them the 5.9. Even after that, we had discussions with them and indicated we find ourselves in a very difficult position. We don't have the fundings. It is not affordable at this stage, but they continued to press. And because they had the arbitration allocation, we could not do that because it would have been illegal for us not to pay them.
So just to understand, the pilots then, as per the process that you've just outlined, will be receiving their 5.9% salary increment.
That's correct. If we don't pay it, they can take us to court and we will be found in default.
And then what about the rest of SAA staff, including the cabin crew, who are basically at the forefront of this strike action that is impending?
The original offer on the table to the flight crew and NUMSA was specifically, we agree that we will give them a 5.9% increase. However, because of affordability and the fact that we don't have funding, we are not in a position to pay them now. The proposal that we put on the table was then that we will allocate them the 5.9, but we'll pay them at a later date when we're in a much better position. What we've done after that, because the one thing we don't want to have is a strike, because of the challenging operating environment that we're currently in. Just to give the listeners a view in terms of how tough it's out there. If we compare from last year January to May to this year January to May in dollars, the average fares for airline tickets went down by 12%. The passengers, which is the volumes, only increased by 2%. So if you compare year over year, before you start, you're 10% behind on the revenue. So we've put certain initiatives in place to try and address them. But that's not sufficient, which means we need to do significantly more on the cost side to make sure that we move to a profitability situation. The shareholder has already indicated they can't continue to fund us. The lenders also gave indication they can't continue to provide us with loans. We as SAA need to make sure that we start becoming self-sufficient. So what we've done is to look at all the cost categories, and we've done many of the other things to try and improve the situation. But that's not sufficient at the end of the day. As a result, we had to look at, we can't afford salary increases, and that was our initial position. We moved from a 0% increase to 5.9 now. What we've done during this week, on Tuesday, we approached the unions to have a discussion. They indicated they're not available. We then yesterday approached them again, that we meet in the afternoon. They were not available as well. Luckily, we could get together last night. And our proposal on the table at this stage is that we will provide them a 5.9% increase. This can only be paid in the 6 months of that will be paid at the end of April, depending on funding. The next 6 months back pay will be paid in October, and then we'll increase their base on the 1st of April 2020 with 5.9 as well.
So what was the response from the unions?
Look, the decision was, or the proposal rather, was not accepted by the unions, because the unions themselves are also not united in terms of this matter. There's one union that is willing to accept the 5.9 increase, subject to certain conditions which they have not accepted. And then there's these two others that have formed an alliance, which is SACCA and NUMSA, who are demanding an 8%. It was following that effort late last night, where we tried to dissuade them from embarking on an industrial action, that it became clear to us that we are not, at least at this stage, able to progress and find a settlement and resolution on the matter. So the decision to cancel flights for Friday and Saturday was really not taken lightly. It was an operational decision that was painfully taken. However, we had to take into account the interests of our flying community. Hence, we sent out that notification late last night in order to advise our customers and the market about the decision that we have taken to cancel flights for Friday and Saturday.
It's a very drastic measure. Has this ever been done before by SAA, where you have literally gone out and cancelled flights on 2 consecutive days? And what will the impact of this be on, firstly, the financial bottom line, but also just from, basically the impact that it will have on your brand as SAA reputationally?
We are trying to mitigate that. Hence, we also took that decision to say that let's give our customers and our flying community a minimum reasonable notice so that they could explore other travel options. On average, we operate approximately 104 flights per day, 44 of those in the domestic market, 47 of those in the regional market, that is into Africa, and 17 of those internationally. We are talking about huge volumes here, and that translates into approximately 52 million a day that would be lost if there's a total shutdown in terms of us not having operations at all on the day.
But maybe I can just add what we found, and one learned from history as well. In previous instances where we have tried to provide flights, we will find that cabin crew, one will not arrive, which means the aircraft can't take off. Then the whole schedule get disrupted. As a result of that, customers will be inconvenienced. What we want to make sure the customers is not inconvenienced. We will assist with them to find alternative arrangements. Our call centers are open at this stage where they can call to see what's available. Where they've booked through an agent, they need to approach the agents, and the agents have been informed. We have also informed all our alliance partners, and we're working with them how we can accommodate. We also don't want a case where you've seen in other countries that there's chaos at the airport, because that creates additional risk. So where any customer's flight will be confirmed on an alternative airline, then we will inform them accordingly, and as a result, we can manage the situation much better.
I would imagine then you would have engaged with other airlines, and what have the outcome of those engagements been? Are they able to absorb many of, or at least the majority of your customers who will now not be accommodated on SAA?
SAA is a member of Star Alliance, and that means that there are certain benefits that we derive out of being an alliance member. So this decision that we put out this information was informed by a process of consultation where we sought to understand the extent to which they should be able to accommodate our customers. This instance of cancelling flights will not, however, affect some of our domestic partners who operate here domestically, being SA Express, Mango, and SA Airlink. They will also should be able to operate, and to the extent that they are able to accommodate passengers on the routes that we serve, we should be able to accommodate them in that manner.
So you've now cancelled these flights for tomorrow and Saturday, but the unions have indicated that this is a strike that could go on indefinitely. What happens beyond that? What's the plan?
Yes, and I think that's where we try to convince them not to go this way. I think one can structure different ways. And one of our discussions last night was also to them, give us proposals. The one thing that we can't move, and it's like anything else, if you don't have money in your bank, you go to the ATM and press, nothing will come up. Currently, we don't have the funding to pay these increases. We just have sufficient funding to run the operational matters within the company. So the issue of a deferred payment is always on the table. Secondly, we're trying to turn the company around. We're trying to reduce the losses. The indication was that 2021-22, we will be in that position. When we get to that position, it would be easier then actually to accommodate increases and make sure that we are also addressing the concerns of the employees.
But SAA should have anticipated that once you've given the increase to the pilots, and I fully understand, I take the point of the processes, the bargaining council agreements and all of that, I take that on board. But even then, the airline should have anticipated that once you've given an increase to one segment of your staff, the others would expect an increase as well. So, could you not have dealt with that better? Could you not have mitigated better in this instance?
If I look in terms of that, I've already indicated the financial situation. From January this year, the market was significantly soft. In terms of revenues, we're running behind 6%. What brings cash in is sales, and the industry is such that you receive cash up front. As a result of that, if you don't have the cash, you can't pay. That's why it's not that we didn't do anything. We offered the 5.9%. The only matter as a discussion point at this is when can we pay it. And ultimately, if you're not in a position to pay it, you can't make that commitment. You can then say, I make the commitment, I'll pay it out. But if you don't have funds to pay for your fuel, your leases, it could create a bigger problem at the end of the day.
Speaking of fuel, and this is a story that's also well documented, it's reported upon, whereby SAA, I think it was 3 years ago in 2016, where you then got into this arrangement to buy fuel from smaller players, and yet the major providers would be able to provide that fuel to you at a better cost price. So have you looked at that situation? I believe it was a 3-year agreement as opposed to the usual agreements where you revise it annually. Have you looked at that situation?
Yes, we've remedied that situation. If you look at SAA, to such an extent, the prices that we got is very competitive now. We also work with Star Lines. When they go out on a tender, we will participate in that, which means we get very good prices ultimately. We're actually increasing the competitive view. We're going out for a global tender now to actually further address that. As I indicated previously, the middlemen that we've taken out, which add 10, 20, 30% on the margins, that's all been taken out. So there's many initiatives that has taken place to try and reduce costs. But ultimately, if you don't have the revenue inflow, you will continue to be in a challenging position.
So I'm glad you addressed that, but that would be just one example of the sort of decisions over years that have also bedeviled the airline. And NUMSA yesterday, through their spokesperson on this show, indicated that they feel that it is wholly unfair that they as workers are being punished for decisions that were made by executives, that as SAA you're not doing enough to try and recuperate some of the funds that have been lost, and you're not doing enough to basically sanction and punitively punish those who have landed the airline in this situation. How do you respond to that?
With respect, that is not entirely accurate. We were recently in Parliament where we appeared before a portfolio committee on public enterprises, where we gave an update in terms of the work that we are doing, specifically dealing with issues of corruption and malfeasance at the airline. We indicated that steps have been taken following a series of internal investigations that were conducted where some of the executives have been dismissed from their employ. Secondly, there are a number of other employees who have been processed internally through internal disciplinary processes in line with our policy. But beyond that, there are matters following the conclusion of our own internal investigations that have been referred to law enforcement agencies for further investigation, and some of these matters have been referred to the National Prosecuting Authority for a possible prosecutorial decision at criminal investigations. Beyond that, AFU in the NPA, as well as the Special Investigating Unit that have the ability and authority in terms of the law to recover the monies that were taken through illegal means, are also on board, and we are awaiting a decision in terms of the presidential proclamation so that work gets underway in terms of us getting the recovery of the monies that were lost.
And just a final question, Mr. Fredericks, you indicated that it's becoming very difficult for SAA to access any sort of funding anywhere. Government is, fed up at this point. The banks are not looking upon you favorably. It's becoming very difficult. So what's the end game? Given the impact of this strike right now, the decision that you've made to cancel flights and going forward, what's the end game? Is there talks of privatization of SAA?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to it. The first part is in terms of discussions. We had very good discussions with the lenders. They opened to provide us our 2 billion funding. This matter doesn't help those discussions. And we will have to go back and confirm that the principal agreement that we have with them, if that's still in place. Based on what has happened now, we will require additional funding as well. And as we said to the unions, when we get additional funding, because it's all about affordability, then we'll be able to look at their demands. What we've gone out of our way now to put a new proposal on the table and say on the end of April, we can pay you the first portion of that. So there's two parts to it. The one is we need to secure the 2 billion funding within this month. The discussions in terms of that are going very well. I will have to determine if what has happened now change that. If the lenders now decide because of what has happened because of the strike and say that not funding us means that we will have to close the airline.
So it's come to that point now.
It has come, and we've warned about this, and that's why we were reaching out to the unions and say, work with us. We know the answer is not what you want, but unfortunately we're all in this situation. And in the various interviews and with the unions, with my presentations to them, I said we all need to work together. We have our differences, but if you're in trouble, then you can't continue fighting with each other. I made the example of the rugby team. If they were fighting with each other because of various matters, we wouldn't have won the World Cup. Here we're just trying to survive. So we need to come, and that includes the shareholder, board, management, employees, and the unions. And we're calling on all employees within SAA, please, let's take the responsibility and make this work. It can work. But it can only work if we all together, we support, and the robust discussions in terms of disagreements, that's welcome. But let's not get to a situation where we are now. And it's not too late to stop the strike. And that's why we're reaching out to them. They have indicated they will go back to their members to see if they, because we asked them as well, if you consider the new offer, please urgently indicate to us. They indicated they will have to come back. Unfortunately, the most important thing is our customers. They pay our bills. That's why we had to give our customers at least 48 hours notice that they with us can make alternative arrangements. And if the union comes back and say we accept the new proposal, then we can start and look at different options and what else we can do on top of that.
So let's just be absolutely clear so that when you leave here, whoever is watching this right now is crystal clear on what the end game is here. So if this strike goes ahead for the next 2 days and maybe even beyond that, that places the airline in a position whereby if the lenders change their mind, the airline will have to close down.
Yes, or government will have to, let me use that word now, bail us out. We know the status of the fiscus. It's been saying over and over. The shareholder has funded us 5.5 billion in this financial year. So we need to do certain things for ourselves, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to accelerate in terms of our turnaround plan. You would have seen that we've received 2 A350s that will already help us reducing the fuel, but also the maintenance. It increased the attractiveness of that product on the New York route, and through that we will get more customers. We will retain what we've got and hopefully get more customers. If you get more revenues, then it's a different ballgame.
Just a final one, the detractors, the naysayers will say this is what you've been planning all along. You've been wanting to privatize SAA, so this is all working towards a plan that has already been in place. And the 900 odd retrenchments that have been spoken about, just a brief word on that as well as we wrap this up.
We need to locate the issue of the 944 or so employees that may be impacted. That is an issue that arises in the context of the strategy implementation. Our strategy, the design of it is based on 5 key pillars, and one of the pillars focuses on optimal organizational design. And this is where the issue is something that has been sold and workshopped to all our internal stakeholders, including the labor unions. They are aware of it. We are now in the implementation stages. Lastly, insofar as the privatization of the airline is concerned, that is a matter that is not within the purview of the management in terms of the decision about the future of the airline. That rests with the shareholder.
Maybe just a final point. If we look in terms of revenues, but because that's your measurement, our labor cost is 24% of your revenue. It's a significant and higher than benchmark. I think the second part is that's why we need to look at how do you be optimized to be competitive at the end of the day. In terms of the equity partner, currently an equity partner, as SA state is, will not be able to come in. And that will probably take at least 2 years. And it's up to the shareholder to do that.
Well, that's where we're going to have to leave it. SAA Acting Chief Financial Officer Deon Fredericks and spokesperson Tlali Tlali speaking to us about the decision that the airline has taken to actually cancel its flights tomorrow and Saturday because of impending industrial action. So let's take a break and we'll have the news after that.